There will be only 33 car driver combinations on this year's Indianapolis 500 starting grid, despite the fact that the entry list is looking like it's pushing towards 37 for the month of May. Not only is that Lazier Racing effort that everybody is doubting absolutely still on track to happen, you guys are going to have to trust me on this for now, but also there's a 37th surprise entry kind of being put together right now for Foyt Racing, which said, oh, we're not doing a third car. Absolutely not. We're focusing on two. Well, it turns out it's looking like Juan Pedrahita, who ran a partial Indy Lights season for Pelfrey Racing last year, has found a bag of gold and will be possibly running a third Foyt car, in addition to James Davison at Harding and J.R. Hildebrand in a second Dreyer and Reinbold car. This is going to be one heck of a stout entry list, the biggest we've seen since 2011. And I didn't think I would have to make a video defending the fact that there will only be 33 cars on the Indianapolis 500 starting grid, especially after Marshall Pruitt wrote such a fantastic editorial piece on Racer.com defending 33 cars. But it seems there's a bit of a groundswell, a movement, if you will, of folks from the segment of race fans, and I'm surprised they're race fans in the first place because they clearly don't understand what racing is all about, but it's the racing is for entertainment purposes only crowd who says despite the fact that there are 37 entries, there should be no bump day this year at Indianapolis. There should be 37 or 38 or 40 or 44 or 50 cars start the race. Everybody that enters should have a position on the starting grid. And this video is going to be telling those people why they're wrong and exactly why 33 is not just a number. Now, those people who seem to think that 33 is just a number, I would also ask you, is 500 just a number? Or would you accept the fact that maybe the Indy 500 needs to be 400 miles? Because attention spans are shorter these days, and we just need to have a shorter race. Or perhaps you like green-white checkers, so the Indy 500 is the 510, 520, 530, depending on how long it takes to get a green flag finish. Maybe that would solve all the problems. Get 5.0 TV ratings and have SportsCenter talking about Indy 500 racing till the end of time. Oh wait, that's not going to happen. Speaking of 33, the last time the Indy 500 had an entry list, or a starting grid, I should say, of less than 33 entries was 1928. And the Indy 500 has started at least 33 cars every year since the year 1934. For reference, that Indy 500 was the 22nd running. We are now on the 102nd running. So it's really not just a tradition, it's an institution at the Indianapolis 500 to start 33. And by the way, the origins of the 33 number itself comes from the Automobile Club of America, the AAA, which used to sanction IndyCar racing in the early years before 1955. And that 33 number is generated so that around a 2.5-mile superspeedway, which is Indianapolis, each of the 33 cars has 400 feet of space to use on the track, theoretically, of course. Now, it's certainly not a safety issue these days because of the close nature of modern racing. Certainly, the Indy 500 could probably safely start maybe 50 cars without running into an issue of too much traffic or having a dangerous situation from having too many cars out on the circuit. So to get a grasp on why this is a bad idea to start more than 33 cars, let's talk about the 2 times since 1934 the Indy 500 has had more than 33 starters. The first time was 1979, which a lot of people may or may not know was the first time IndyCar racing had a major split. Early in 1970, or I guess late in 1978, CART, Championship Auto Racing Teams, was formed, and in early 1979, they held their first official race. Well, by the time the month of May rolled around and the entry forms were filed by the CART teams, they were roundly rejected, in which the CART teams had to take the United States Auto Club and the Indianapolis Motor Speedway to court. They won. The CART teams were reinstated and allowed to qualify. However, USAC wasn't done with their ridiculous rules. In order to protect some of the drivers who stayed loyal to the USAC National Championship, they decided to have a special last chance qualifier session the day before the race. Yes, the day before the race still had qualifying for the Indianapolis 500. 11 cars attempted to make the field, which would have possibly, if all the cars had made the show, pushed the entry to 44 cars for the 1977 race. However, only 2 managed to qualify. Those drivers were Billy Vukovich II and George Snyder. So, due to USAC politics deciding to try to not only protect their own drivers that had stayed loyal to them, but also to protect their butts in court, they had a last chance qualifier and 35 cars started the 79 race. Fast forward to 1997, the second split. After USAC and CART mended their bridges in 1982, it all fell apart once again in 1994 with the formation of the Indy Racing League, which ran its first Indianapolis 500 in 1996, which more or less went off without a hitch. Get to 1997 and the wagon wheels fell off. This is where we had our second attempt at a 35-car Indianapolis 500 grid, in which Lyn St. James and Johnny Unser were added to the field. The reason they missed the show in the first place was not because they were too slow in the first place to make it, but because they were fast enough, but were bumped out of the field due to a controversial ruling by USAC and the Indy Racing League called the 25-8 rule. And to explain the 25-8 rule, essentially, the top 25 in IRL points from the first few races of the season, meaning Loudon, Las Vegas, Phoenix, and Disney World, would be locked into the race, assuming they could make a minimum speed, which was so ridiculously low anybody could make it. This rule was put into effect probably because they learned their lesson in some respect from 1979 to keep the kart teams out of Indianapolis without getting sued. So the 25 locked-in positions were absolutely for Indy Racing League competitors, but there were also 8 open spots that were open for anybody to qualify. This was designed to prevent the 29 individual kart teams from coming over, buying IRL equipment, and bumping all of the possibly lower funded and slightly less experienced IRL teams out of the series and possibly completely wrecking their budgets for the year. However, this left such a PR blunder, as it looked like the 33 fastest cars were not going to qualify for the 1997 Indianapolis 500, that they decided to let St. James and Unser into the field. So let me get this straight. You guys who want more than 33 cars want to emulate the 2 years that were potentially the biggest black eyes on the sport of IndyCar racing, period. If you look at those 2 years and you look at the problems that IndyCar still faces today, most of those problems can be traced back to 1979 and 1997. And yet here we are in the year of our Lord and Savior Buddy Lazier, 2018, want to go back and go to these years and say, hey, you know what? 1979, 1997, you know what? Those were the peak years of the Indy 500. They did a really good job of managing things. But David, you may be saying, those teams that are putting together the money to put together an entry, if they don't qualify, they're not going to make anything and they won't come back next year. Well, let me give you some facts. Let me give you some numbers. The last place finisher in last year's Indianapolis 500, Jay Howard, made, and I wrote this down, $200,305. Now, let me ask you, if the field of 33 is expanded to 37, do you think that that prize money is going to go up, or do you think it's going to go down? Now, I'm sorry. Socialism, you can't sell me socialism in racing. These are teams that are putting up hundreds of thousands of dollars to buy their rolling chassis and tens of thousands of dollars for an engine lease. And yet you are worried. You are worried about whether they're going to be able to put food on the table. I'm sorry. I understand where you're coming from, but we're not talking about the poor here. We're talking about essentially the lifestyles of the rich and famous. Even the lowest teams, the lowest caliber drivers, most of them are not struggling to put food on the table. So you're not going to get me with a pity story that for some reason we need to suddenly, after 102 years, be concerned whether or not we're sending 3 or 4 cars home. And by the way, that's not to say that the prize money does not need a desperate increase for the Indianapolis 500. It certainly does. I think $200,000 for the world's biggest race to finish last is honestly not enough considering the cost of racing. But my point ultimately is, like I said previously, if you let 37 in, the prize money, even if they increase it, is just going to be distributed amongst more teams, and therefore the teams that actually make the show, make the effort, make the grade, are not going to be paid anymore. So it doesn't solve the problem ultimately. Speaking of economics, objectively, the economy is significantly better than it was in the prime most recent years of bumping. 2008. 4 cars were bumped. 2009, 3 cars were bumped. 2010, 4 cars were bumped. 2011, 7 cars didn't make the race. And you want to talk about letting extra entries now? Where were y'all at in 2013 when Michel Jourdain Jr. went home as the 34th and only car bumped from the field? Where were you guys in 2015 when Buddy Lazier was the only car to miss the show in 34th qualifying position? Where were you guys? You guys weren't arguing that there needed to be a 34th slot. You guys are only arguing now because you see a big grid of cars and you automatically assume that there are big sponsors that will automatically leave the sport if they don't make the show. I mean, you guys are thinking too hard about this. They know the risks. The teams have informed at least most of their sponsors. There's always the possibility of an Andretti Ryan Hunter race situation showing up where the sponsor is like, how are we not in the race? This doesn't make any sense. I think most of the teams, especially the ones that are worried about getting bumped the most, have sold that, hey, look, we may not make the race, to their sponsors, to their partners, and to the drivers that are paying them to get in the show. This is not something that these people aren't thinking about. If you're thinking about it, Joe somebody sitting on your couch typing in the Racer magazine comments, believe me, the people who are putting these entries together have thought of it. I will leave you on this point. In terms of the most important races in the world, the Indianapolis 500 is the only race that you qualify for on merit left in the entire world. Daytona 500, that has been ruined by charter systems and provisional starters. You're guaranteed a spot as long as you pay into the charter system. You want to talk about the 24 Hours of Le Mans, which I believe in some years has been the objectively best race in the world. And this is coming from someone who grew up 40 miles from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. You don't have to qualify at Le Mans. You get an automatic invitation. You don't have to worry that Corvette's not going to make the race. You don't have to worry that Toyota's not going to make the 24 Hours of Le Mans. If they show up, if they post a qualifying time, they don't even have to really post a qualifying time. They make the race. The last time somebody didn't qualify for a Formula One race was not because someone was faster. It was because the HRT team didn't make the 107% qualifying minimum, and they were bumped from the field simply because they were too slow. So if you look at the world of motorsport, and in terms of, I know people always criticize me for being a purist, for being an elitist. I don't care. You know what? The Indianapolis 500 is the last race, the last bastion of what made racing, automobile racing, the top sport in the United States, the thing that drives such incredible passion from its fans, from its competitors. The drive, the prestige. This is a prestige thing. This isn't just a traditional thing. 33 cars start the Indianapolis 500. If people get sent home, you know what? They get sent home. They'll find a way to sell another sponsor or their current sponsor that, hey, we can make it next year. We didn't make it this year. We were 2 miles an hour off. We were half a second off. We were 1/10 of a second off. We were 1/100th of a second off. There will always be people willing to dive into the Indianapolis 500. There will always be people willing to take a gamble. There will always be people willing to jump at this. This is the greatest race in the world, the biggest prize. So the fact that we have now gotten somehow, some way, after so many blunders, after so many missteps, we've gotten back to the point where the Indianapolis 500 has a strong entry list again. We are kind of at a crossroads. I think this is the last time you can kind of save the prestige. You can save the tradition. If you don't let them bump this year, that little bit of prestige, that little bit of tradition, that little bit that still puts Indianapolis above Le Mans, above Daytona, above Monaco. You lose that, you lose what the Indianapolis 500 has been building back towards since the second split in '96. I really, really believe very, very strongly that we need to bump this year. Again, I'm a Buddy Lazier fan. I'm more than well aware that he will probably get bumped this year, but maybe he won't. I mean, that's excitement. That's drama. You want to talk about entertainment? The Indianapolis 500 shouldn't just provide one day of entertainment. It should all be entertainment. The entire month of May. Suddenly, practice days have stakes because we're going to be seeing who the fastest 33 are on the timesheets. What if Scott Dixon has trouble in qualifying and doesn't make the race? You worry about PNC Bank. I guarantee you they'll be on the 10 car if he doesn't make, it's all these things. It's all these things coming together. This is a real big deal, and I really hope the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, we've had comments from Doug Bowles that say he's staunchly for 33 cars. We have not heard from Mark Miles yet, which makes me a little bit nervous. But this is a big turning point, and one that I'm really hoping, I'm really, really crossing my fingers, that the people in charge make the right decision, because ultimately it's that prestige thing. That's all it's about. Prestige at the Indianapolis 500. So thank you guys so much for watching. This has been David Land on YouTube. If you enjoy IndyCar videos like this and other motorsports content, be sure to subscribe, and also let me know what your thoughts on 33 entries or 33 starters in the Indianapolis 500 is. Are you willing to argue against me? I'd love to hear that as well. And we'll see you in the next video.